Good afternoon. I'd like to talk to you today about something that I teach routinely when it comes to international relations. I've taught American foreign policy uh, fairly regularly at one time, and now it comes up all the time in Introduction to Political Science and other courses. And international relations can be a little complicated. At its most challenging, it's kind of like Game of Thrones and Dune mashed up together with steroids. But when you get down to it, the goals are fairly simple. And there is one central overriding goal, one interest that supersedes all others. It is the Ichiban numero uno, number one objective of all of them. And everything really flows from this one. Anything else that comes in is secondary, or it serves this big one. That goal is national security. Now, you may think of this in terms of realpolitik, the power school, maybe military intervention, military strength, deterrence. Yeah, that's all true, but it could be served in other ways as well. For example, through the construction of strong international institutions that reduce the need for war and ensure um, a peaceful global environment where national security is not threatened. We see this after World War I with the creation of the League of Nations through the Treaty of Versailles, and then later in the 20s through the Kellogg-Briand Treaty, which tried to outlaw war. And it started off as a bilateral treaty between the United States and France, and then was signed on. It was signed on to by most of Europe, starting ironically with Germany, where they forswore resort to war to solve disputes. It's very idealistic, and it's gotten really a bad reputation over the years, but it was an early expression of collective security. And this demonstrates too that an approach to security can be undertaken with the help of allies, even neutrals, even rivals that set rules for competition, that they can resolve disputes. When they come up, there will be disputes, but they're not necessarily going to the mattresses and endangering each other's people, territory, and vital interests. It's not going to cost lives. The United Nations was an attempt to perfect Woodrow Wilson's vision after World War II, when the League of Nations failed, in part because it required uh, unanimity among the members to take action. The United Nations took a different approach, which vested real power in the Security Council, a lot less power in the General Assembly. And the Security Council still has 5 permanent members. And these were the countries that won World War II. That the legacy of World War II is that the United States, Britain, France, the Soviet Union, and China were all incorporated as permanent members of the Security Council, and they have veto power, and each one does because you require a unanimous vote among 5 rather than everybody. So this is an attempt towards a more peaceful, less threatening world in which everybody's vital national interests and national security are less threatened. Whether it has worked out that way or not in practice, I'll leave that to you. That's a matter for debate. Personally, I see a lot of problems. And we do judge policies by their effectiveness and especially cost effectiveness rather than by intent. And intent is good, but the reality, the results are far, far more important. We can see this too for something that is much less idealistic from our point of view, which is the Congress of Europe Holy Alliance system that evolved in Europe through the Congress of Vienna after the Napoleonic Wars. Nobody wanted a repeat of all that. It was the French Revolution and the Napoleonic Wars were a threat basically to everybody's national security in Europe, especially. And to get better guarantee national security, the great powers held the Congress of Vienna, and this included France, by the way, because Napoleon was outlawed upon his return to the throne. France was not considered a combatant. They never declared war on France, they declared war on Napoleon personally. So the system that evolved after the Napoleonic Wars, and really with the Austrian foreign minister Clement Metternich being the guiding force, was one that enforced the status quo. It would not give much credence or any support to revolutions. That everybody backed off the idea that a revolution in Europe or an adjacent area could be legitimate. And it was a big shock when the Greek War for Independence started, and the Greeks initially got no support from anybody because this was a violation of that system. They were basically on their own until the Turks and especially the Egyptians started committing major human rights violations, as we would term it, in Greece. And then the rest of Europe got off their horse and united to fight the Turks, culminating in the Battle of Navarino, which sealed the prospects for Greek independence, but it was very reluctant. And we can also see too through this reactionary defensive conservative system that national security was guaranteed for the participants for 99 years, from 1815 until World War I in 1914. And this system allowed, there were still going to be wars in Europe, but you're not going to have the sort of existential, massive, long-term bloodletting that you would have had during the French Revolution and Napoleon's imperium. They tended to be short. They tended to be limited. And some examples would be the Crimean War, where one could argue that the Congress of Europe system essentially broke down. The rise of Germany entailed a short war against between Prussia and Austria in 1866, and then a longer, more destructive war from 1870 into 1871 between France, first the empire under Napoleon III, against Prussia and a united Germany that basically Bismarck tricked, corralled, and maneuvered into first an alliance and then a basic subservience to Prussia. So there were going to be wars, but you're not going to have the really bad ones. And there are going to be far fewer threats to the participants, to their national security. You can go about it too through soft power. You could say that a country can try to build its reputation through the arts, movies, basic influence outside of international relations. And a good example that I know of is Thailand. You may wonder why there were so many Thai restaurants in the United States and elsewhere when there were so few Thai immigrants. Usually ethnic food is tied to immigrant communities. It's why when you have a large Mexican community, you got great Mexican restaurants. This is where we got Italian food. This is where we got Indian food. But you don't have a lot of Thais. One reason is that the Thai government has subsidized the founding of Thai restaurants. to get Thai food and Thai culture out there. That people will think of Thai food and Thailand um, in the same thought. And it's a public relations thing, and public relations and propaganda, they do work. We've seen far more negative uses of propaganda through the years. We've seen it actually weaponized. We've seen soft power used both against the country's own people and um, neighbors, neutrals, and rivals. This has nothing to do with how many divisions does the King of Thailand have. It has to do with shut up and eat your pad thai. And it's non-threatening, but it enhances Thailand's national interests. We see it through shifting alliances, as Britain maintained through the 18th century. They were allied with every great power in Europe at one time, and they also fought every great power in Europe through the 18th and 19th centuries. This is something that I would like to cover in another video, but this is another approach to national security and its insurance. NATO and the system of permanent alliances after World War II, first with NATO and then the Warsaw Pact, can be seen as very clear attempts to ensure the national security of its members. The United States, for example, in NATO, had a guaranteed alliance facing the Soviets in Europe and basically permanent bases. The Europeans, savaged after World War II, wanting to spend money on reconstruction and then additional infrastructure and social programs, including national health services, saw the benefits to their security and being underneath the American military and nuclear umbrella. This isn't because everybody were all great friends. This is because they had a convergence of interests in their national security. And this can go in directions that you don't expect. For example, NATO's whole mission was to contain and, in the event of a war, fight the Soviets and their allies. But when the NATO alliance really kicked in was when a non-state actor, namely Osama bin Laden, launched his attacks on the United States on September 11th, 2001. And the NATO alliance was activated and took on a military role, first flying combat air patrols over the United States, and then conducting a mission in Afghanistan to destroy Al-Qaeda and overthrow the Taliban. You have a permanent alliance that goes off in a whole other direction against a whole other enemy, finds a purpose that it never expected. And the guiding force here is national security, including for the United States, not just the countries that would sooner buy hospitals and roads than tanks. And it was in the end it turned out to be good for everybody. Although since the mission in Afghanistan, especially since then, and really going back to the fall of the Soviet Union, there has been a lot of discussion about exactly what is NATO's mission. But it still goes back to the whole idea of trying to guarantee national security. Now, there are exceptions that look like exceptions, but maybe not be, not totally. Right now, there's a lot of attention on things like peacekeeping operations and humanitarian relief, often conducted by a country's military. Canada, for example, is taking great pride in its role in United Nations peacekeeping. The United States takes pride in humanitarian efforts, along with Europe especially. That you have an earthquake, the United States Navy shows up. It's not to destroy everything that's left. It's not to break things and hurt people. It's to deliver food. That this is very important, and you may not see a clear connection to national security here. But there is one. You could easily argue that this is a reputational effort, not just one of humanity and altruism, but one in which a country shows that it cares. That they see the U.S. Navy showing up, they see the helicopters with the stars and bars on them, they see American relief supplies, and it will build goodwill, which enhances national security, assuming that there is goodwill to be built, and that your forces do not act in a high-handed and abusive manner, and that the people who are being helped have called a sense of gratitude, a sense of recognition, which sometimes can happen. I definitely saw it in the Netherlands, where the humanitarian effort was basically kicking out the Germans in World War II. And there was a feeling of gratitude among many Dutch towards the United States, towards Britain, towards Canada. And one can see a similar effort going into disaster relief, any sort of humanitarian mission, that this is trying to get a similar goal. And I find it very significant that John F. Kennedy was the sponsoring, call him the patron saint of the U.S. Army Special Forces, that they renamed their Special Operations Non-Conventional War Center after President Kennedy. He was a hawk on defense. He was a very strong, committed anti-communist. Two reasons why he's one of my favorite Democrats. That he was he had a clear view of international relations, and even if he sometimes failed at things, think of the Bay of Pigs, he had a clear view of the two sides of the coin, which could be military force, which he was committed to, and also the Peace Corps. The Peace Corps can be viewed not as a strictly idealistic organization. That you may take the idealism of the volunteers and harness that, but it's a projection of American soft power into the developing world. And in that, it's the flip side, as I see it, of the special forces. And both are valid, both serve American national security, and they've evolved over the years to different sorts of missions in different places, but their essential mission remains the same. So it all comes down to national security. Everything else is secondary, or it serves national security. Now, you may hear a foreign policy actor talk otherwise, that they will talk about how they're just helping their fellow man. That the international order, for example, may be more important than their individual security. I seldom, if ever, believe this. For example, the international order would not gain support if it did not enhance or even guarantee the national security of its supporters. That we've seen it before with the Congress of Europe system. We've seen it with the League of Nations and the United Nations. That it may look all high and bloody mighty and morally superior, but they all serve concrete purposes, namely national security. You may have humanitarian missions that are portrayed as altruistic, and they'll be portrayed as we absolutely have to help these poor people. That may be the rhetoric. That may be the primary mission. I'm not so cynical as to say that every country is 100% selfish 100% of the time. But there will be a national security component to that almost entirely. Every case. Now, this isn't necessarily a bad thing, because a foreign policy actor, whether it's a president, prime minister, king, head of government, head of state, foreign minister, secretary of state, pope, whomever, This is their mission. This is their job description. And anyone who says otherwise, that they're just doing this for the good of humanity, I don't believe it. Very, very seldom. And they may say that national security does not matter. They're either an idiot, a liar, or a traitor. Now, this may sound very harsh, and maybe it is, but I think it's true. Some may be more vocal about national security being central. Some may try to cover it up. And there might even be one or two who are so idealistic or so loyal, perhaps to another country or another ideology, that national security comes in second, third, or maybe down the list. It's very hard for me to think of a really good example of that is incontrovertible, but some may pretend, and either they don't mean it or they're not to be trusted and should be removed from office immediately. This is just how it is. This is your job description. This is your duty to your country and to its people. You have to uphold their vital national interests, whatever they might be. Hopefully they're all for the good and not just going pure Adolf Hitler on people. And by the way, I don't think that Adolf Hitler served German national security, not in the long run, for the fact that Germany was crushed, defeated, and ground under the boots of the Allies. Yeah, smooth move, Adolf. So besides being evil, he was also in the long run ineffective, and he did not entirely serve that national security mission. I think it's worth debating and discussing in terms of ethics and morality, how far you can push this. But it is important. It is central. How you define national security, and then how do you protect it? Those are the elements of the debate. What is not to be debated, really, is the goal of national security. And this is something that I have taught repeatedly over the years. And I have not seen any evidence that I'm really going down the wrong path here. I think when you get past the rhetoric to the contrary, you get past the protestations of, oh, we're so well-meaning and charitable, we are the world, you can better see what it is. And you can better evaluate what's going on around you if you can go by actions rather than words, and keep that one numero uno ichiban overriding goal in mind. Things become a lot clearer, and I think it's much less confusing, not just confusing, I think it's more accurate. In this case, the confusion goes away and you can see what's really going on. And it's not always bad. It's not always a Hitler type approach to aggression, waging aggressive war, as it was called at Nuremberg. It's not always going over to the dark side. It can actually lead to long-term benefits to the entire world when everybody attends to their own national security. You could have long-term peace. You could have demilitarization. You could have enhanced commerce. I don't believe that the creation of NATO and the European Union had anything to do with altruism so much as they did with converging national interests in terms of security, in terms of politics, and in terms of economics, which creates bigger markets, and a rising tide lifts all boats. And the European Union, by the way, they make moves towards having a military component, but the real strength, if there is one, has to do with creating a larger continental market for each other's goods and services. National security, a vital national interest, which is prosperity. So just try to keep this in mind. When there's a lot of blather out there A lot of moral judgments, perhaps they're perfectly valid, but keep national security in mind as the overriding goal, objective, whatever, of international relations. In terms of each country, it could be collective, it could be individual, it can take a lot of forms with a lot of approaches, but it all goes back to that central principle. So, thank you for your time. Feel free to share, like, and subscribe. And there'll be more political science stuff coming in the future. And check out the other videos too. And if you subscribe and get notifications, you'll see when they come out. But again, thank you for your time and attention. And I hope this proved enjoyable and useful. Bye.